There has been some kind of a universal system at use in the ancient world. And these various cultural groups, whether it was the Egyptians or Sumerians or Mayans or the Hopewellians or the megalithic builders, had access to some universal system from some source that was outside their own cultural context. And I suggest that the source of that goes back into deep time, that takes us back beyond the threshold of known history into the realm of mythical history, which means we're going back like into the Ice Age, back into the Pleistocene, to use the geologist term, back into the deep recesses of the human tenure on planet Earth, whose only memory has come down to us not in the form of recorded history, but in the form of myth and epic story and legend and so forth. Because as it turns out, if we, and this is again is a good topic for the sacred geometry class, when we analyze Plato's description of Atlantis, Plato basically gave the date of the sinking of Atlantis as 9,000 years prior to Solon, the Egyptian, the Athenian poet and statesman. Solon did a 10-year exile in Egypt. And it was Solon that brought back the tale of Atlantis and presented it to the Greeks. And Solon basically made that journey around 600 BC. So if you add the 9,000 years to the 600 BC, we come up with a date of about 11,600 years ago for Plato's date for the demise of Atlantis. Well, it's very interesting that the date 11,600 years has been independently discovered by geologists looking at the tempo of various catastrophes that have occurred on Earth. And to those catastrophes is where I'm now going to turn. Catastrophes in the time of man, the tempo of global change. What I've done here is I put a time bar that goes from the present, right here. This is us now. This is today. Right here is May 3rd at 4 o'clock. Is it 4 o'clock? That's right here. And this is 150,000 years ago. And the reason I used 150,000 years is that some of the earliest skeletal remains ever discovered of modern humans date back to 150 to even to 180,000 years. Skeletons that appear to be indistinguishable from a modern skeleton, which suggests that modern humans with presumably equivalent intelligence to our own were present on the planet at least this far back. So here we've got a 150,000 year time span. You'll notice this little red bar at the end. That red bar represents the span of recorded history, which is basically the advent of Sumerian cuneiform writing. So if it turns out that there were modern humans living through this whole span of time, why is there no history? Well, now you got to do is turn to these various things that I've put on here. These are events that have occurred. And I used a certain criteria for these events. And here's the criteria I used. I began studying the record of geological change, climate change, environmental change, and I focused on events that could be considered catastrophic. And catastrophic to the extent that were an event of an equivalent magnitude to occur now, it would basically end civilization as we know it. That's the criteria I used. What would be the magnitude of an event that it would take to terminate our modern industrial civilization? That's the criteria that I used. Then I began to search through the record of all of the events that would be of that magnitude or greater. And the events that I found so far have been entered onto this graph, and they're listed all here. You can see them. And how many do we have here? And this is not complete necessarily, but we have at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 of them in 150,000 years. So at least 16 times in the last 150,000 years, there have been climate or environmental or geological catastrophes powerful enough that were they to occur today would essentially put us back into the Stone Age. Would essentially, if you think about some of the small catastrophes we have seen in the last few years, from the destruction of New Orleans to the great tsunami, to some of the big earthquakes that we've seen, New Orleans is still not recovered. But you've got to imagine what would happen if an event that was one order of magnitude greater than Katrina happened. By that I mean 10 times worse. Let's say that we had 10 cities decimated to the extent of New Orleans. We could certainly recover from that, but it would be a major effort to do so. Now what if we were talking about 2 orders of magnitude? Let's say, to put it into a rough equivalency, an event that could cause the decimation of 100 major urban areas. Could we recover from that? Questionable. Now let's go 3 orders of magnitude. And now we're talking about the equivalent of 1,000 major cities completely decimated. Okay, at that level, 3 orders of magnitude, that's what these are. Those are events that essentially would be 3 orders of magnitude. Once you begin to ponder this, it becomes apparent why there isn't a record, an extant record of what's been going on for the whole time that we humans have been here. Now, at this point, you probably haven't tied this in with what we've been saying before, other than I'll point out a few things to you that should be: onset of the late Wisconsin Ice Age, 26,000 years before present. Remember the great year and the precessional cycle? Add about 80 years to that, and we've got 26,000. Of course, 26,000 you could figure plus or minus a few centuries. Now, you come through that cosmic clock that I showed you, right? Halfway to the cusp of the age of Leo. 12,900 years ago, roughly. And what happened? We have something that happened 12,900 years before present. Onset of the Younger Dryas climate catastrophe, first phase of the megafaunal extinctions. Now here what I've done is I've entered some green dots. Now look at what the green dots are. The green dots are basically derived directly from the model of the Great Year, based upon cycles of 6,480, 12,960, and then 25,920. And you'll notice how high of a correlation there is between the tempo of events, the actual events that have been derived by scientists without any reference to this Great Year model at all, and the timing of these ages of the world. Remember the 6,480 years, that was the bull, the lion, the eagle, and the man. And according to the traditions, each of those seasons of the Great Year is inaugurated by some type of a great event, a transformative event, a catastrophe, if you will. And what I've done here is I have developed a data set that shows the correlation. It certainly seems from a study of this graph that these intervals, these event nodes as I call them, the susceptibility of something happening goes up exponentially for a short period of time. Here's the analogy that I have used. You're out driving along a quiet country road, you've got it on cruise control, you're kicking back, you're listening to some tunes, you're not paying much attention, you're talking on your cell phone, not much traffic. Okay, now you come up to a major highway, and cars are like this. Well, you're crossing that intersection, and while you're crossing that intersection, now suddenly you got to put your cell phone down and start paying attention, because if you don't, you're going to get T-boned, right? Well, obviously, you've got your whole journey, and each time you cross an intersection of a major highway, the potential of a catastrophe increases considerably over what it would be while you're out there on the lonely country road. Well, You see, our planet is on a cosmic highway around the galaxy. And we're now beginning to understand the fine structure of the galaxy, and we realize that there is a pattern and an order to it. And there's a tempo of these orbital revolutions. There's a tempo of the galaxy. And there's a wave pattern of the Earth moving up and down, above and below the galactic plane. And within that, there are suborbital cycles as well. And we also discover that there seems to be a tempo in the delivery of cosmic matter to the inner solar system. It doesn't seem to be random. And this is going to be beyond the scope of today's lecture, but what I'm getting at here is that the evidence now supports the conclusion that the delivery of cosmic material and energy, the energy pulses that would be affecting Earth, are non-random. That they are on some kind of a cosmic timetable, a cosmic tempo, if you will. And I think this is one of the most important insights we get from these ancient traditions, is the measurement of cosmic time and how it relates to us here on Earth. You just got to know what to look for and where to look for it. Once you begin to become aware of it and you begin to see it, you begin to realize that the cosmic fingerprints are everywhere about us. We're in fact living in and upon the wreckage of the former worlds. The rubble of these former worlds is all around us, but we haven't had the scale of perspective to see it. And that's where we're at now. I'm completely thrilled with things like the emergence of Google Earth, because Google Earth is now allowing us to all of us to sit at our computers and see the cosmic perspective of Earth. And when you look at it from the extraterrestrial point of view, things begin to show up that we don't see when we're right down here immersed on it so close that we're like ants walking on the rubble and can't see what's around us. But we do see that we literally have built our own world and our own social system on top of and out of the wreckage of former worlds.
Are out and the streets are gray. You know I wouldn't have it any other way. Yeah, your mother's words, they're ringing still. But your mother don't pay our bills. Yeah, a sinister kid is a kid who runs.
Well, hello friend. Hope you are doing well. It's another beautiful day up here in the Pacific Northwest. I hope that where you're living, it's another beautiful day there too. So today we're going to be going into our fourth level of human origin theory. And I appreciate everybody, and I want to say thanks to everybody who have taken the time to watch these videos. Thank you. And I hope, my real hope is that whoever watches these videos simply gets a wider angle perspective of themselves and of the earth and of the universe. That's really my hope. So I'm going to offer you today an entirely new concept of origin theory, and the 3 videos before this have hopefully done a good job of really putting some doubt, really strong doubt, into your perception of what you've been told you are and what you've been told the world and universe is. So to me, to answer the question of origin theory, it's not about history. It's not about the right story. It's about identity. And funny enough, it goes back to the question that Alan Watts asked his whole career, and that is, who are you? And so, are you the light or the bulb answers the question of your origin. Can you see that? Because you're not the bulb. In other words, you're not the body. That's not who you are. And I once heard a professor call hallucinogens anti-hallucinogenic drugs, because they pull you out of the hallucinogen that is the life that's been instructed to you. And that's hard to pull out of that body. Let me just tell you right now. Pulling out of fundamental anything, whatever religion, pulling out of that when it's your fundamental base of understanding, man, that's not something you just wake up one day and decide to do. Any more than you wake up one day and decide, I'm going to lose 50 pounds today. You know, that's just not the way the world works, and that's not the way understanding of who you are works. And since who you are is consciousness, that which is beyond all understanding, the mystery, the great mystery, the mysterium tremendum, that's your identity, which is a Rubik's Cube. So how are you gonna build a creation story for that? Okay, so this loosens you from being caught up in the idea that you have a start point, because your true identity transcends time. Do you realize that? Is that a reality that you can see? And since you transcend time in your identity, you are the light, not the bulb. How can that have a start point? Think about that. That's a philosophical conundrum. What's called in Zen a koan. Except you don't have to be a Zen Buddhist to realize this one. Okay, so the earth resonates like a bell. The earth is a bell. The resonance is called the Schumann resonance. It's a very low frequency resonance. And there are what are called ley lines, or dragon lines, or serpent paths that run around the earth because it's an electromagnetic sphere. It's a toroid. If you look at the electromagnetic energy, it's moving north to south in a constant flowing motion of a torus. And so that electromagnetic energy causes the earth to resonate. There are highly resonant intersections of the ley lines strewn throughout the earth, and the location of the pyramids, Mount Shasta, I can't remember where the one is in China, but there's a number of these points. If you ever look at a symbol, when you strike a symbol, there's a resonating frequency that runs through the symbol as it's ringing, much like if you see a drop of water hit the surface of water, a ripple will come out. There'll be many ripples, but there'll be a main ripple that will come out, and it will bounce off of the shoreline or whatever and come back. And that flowing back and forth motion is a lot like the picture of the flowing motion of these lines on the earth. And at these intersections, this is where monuments have been built and rituals are located, because the harmony or the frequency of the earth is so strong in these locations. Stonehenge is another one. Okay, well, these are there in the same way that the human body has resonating frequency points called the chakras. And there are specific chakras at specific frequencies, and these specific frequencies directly intertwine with your emotional state. So your baseline drives, your sex drive, your will to live, your power projection are lower frequency energies, and they are located lower in the body. Okay? And then you have frequencies like love and compassion and joy. These are higher frequencies, and they resonate higher along the spine. They're directly related. And the earth is no different. The earth has differentiating, resonating frequencies, and there are high points throughout the earth. And if you know where those are at and what they are associated with, you have, or you wield great power. In the same way, a person that learns their chakras and learns how to harmonize their mind with the frequencies of the chakras wields great power. This all ties into your being a light being, a creature of light. You are both the wave and the resonance, because you're a light being, because you're both a particle and a wave. And so since you are a being of light, a particle and a wave, you are of the same caliber as the universe. You operate on those same levels of frequency. You've just been conned with materialism. And so materialism has enclosed or enveloped your mind. And so the whole idea of identifying as a light being opens your mind to the real true power that you carry and have. But if the mind is closed with specific ideas and materialism, egoism, these kind of things, when the mind is closed with those things, there's no learning, there's no development, there's no realization. And so epiphany, rapture are fleeting things. Realizing that you're a being of light changes the whole perception of your origin. Because when did the universe begin? That would be the same beginning as you. The mystery that is the universe is also yourself. Because the characteristics of the universe are also the characteristics of you. So when you can identify in this way, you see, this loosens the whole need for a creation story, the whole need for an origin story. It's a better way to put it. It relinquishes you from the demand of having a material beginning. Can you see that? And when you are freed, when you are liberated from that idea of materialism, basically, right? You're not locked down to this idea that you had a start point. You see, you have to see yourself in a larger light. And so by detangling you from having to essentially force a material beginning, you are liberated. Because you're no longer tied down to the idea of this body. Because that's not who you are. The challenge of the mind, the challenge of life, is relinquishing from those kind of demands. It's called kenosis, to self-empty. And when you can self-empty, you empty of the demands that a materialistic idea and philosophy is concerned with. And that state is the liberated state. That state is the state of nirvana. That is enlightenment. Seeing it in this way, then, you can see how farcical all of the origin myths are, because they belittle you, because you're not a material being. religions demand that you become this material emanation, like this material idea, a body. But you're not the body. You're the light within the body. In other words, you can't get dirty. And by identifying with the light, you see, you then are not going to concern yourself with ridiculous ideas of having a start point, or like having a start point. You're not, you won't be caught up. And this is liberation, man. That's freedom. Moving past previous concerns. Identifying as a light being, you move past material concerns. Kenosis. This is what the story of the cross is. Kenosis. The death of the body. It's tainted when it's put into a religious sense, in that there's some type of religious activity going on. It's not. This is a word picture. It's like if you try to describe love to somebody, you give them word pictures. You give them a story of a compassionate act, and then the person will be like, oh, okay, I completely can get that. Okay, so in the same way then, if you really want to know your origin, you experience being the light. How do you experience being the light? By identifying with the light, by seeing yourself as the light, by seeing that which animates the universe as that which animates yourself. Just keep it simple. Don't complicate it with all kinds of ritualistic demand. Keep it simple. And once the perspective is cleansed like that, through simplicity, through just identity, the world just completely opens, because it's not being held in a specific. Do you see then how easy it is to con someone by simply causing them to not identify with themselves as being the light, the great mystery, but being an evolved creature, a created creature that sinned? By building a red herring, the person pursues a materialistic endpoint, ensuring their safety after death, ensuring that they're in the right group now, ensuring that all their bad deeds are forgiven and they're on good terms. These are materialistic concerns. So by filling a person with materialistic concerns, they can't identify with the light that they are. That's a mindset. That's a control agent. That's why I called it in my book The Agency of Sin, because sin is an agency. So if your creation story is tied into sin, there's the taint starts right at the beginning. The corruption is right at the beginning. And so identity is lost because the beginning has been tainted. And that's why I started my book by saying a beginning is a very delicate time. Because that's right when religion gets you. You already identify as a certain way, created at a specific time in a specific earth history. And that's a con, to lock you in that space and never get out, so there's no development. This is why catastrophe has to happen, folks. Because catastrophe is going to be the only thing that's going to pull people out of the particular resonation that they're at. And most people are at a lower resonation. And they're not going to get out of that low resonation without a strike. You got to strike the bell. And in this case, it's striking the mind. You got to strike the mind with radical new ideas, and this causes a different frequency to resonate, to harmonize in the mind. And so that's why things are the way that they are. That's why they're so messed up. because the stagnancy, the frequency of the human culture has stagnated for all the reasons that I've laid out already. It's stagnated. And so now is the time when it's breaking out of that stagnation. The bell has been struck and people are awakening, because we are resonant creatures, resonating creatures, frequency-oriented creatures. And so when the bell is struck, the earth going through its cataclysms, society going through its cataclysms, the ringing breaks people out of the stagnancy. And when you see it in this way, everything's okay. It's tough, yeah, but it's okay, because we're harmonizing to a higher frequency, a frequency that's oriented to love, not conflict, because we're a conflict-oriented society. See? Now, I know Joseph Campbell and Alan Watts both said that life has no meaning, and that the meaning that you bring to life is you yourself, your own experience, your own understanding, and concepts of the world, and then from that meaning can be derived. But there's no inherent meaning in the universe, in their philosophy. And I'm kind of a dreamer. I'm kind of an idealist. I'm a glass half full kind of person. And so I like to conceptualize the universe not as something that's falling apart, but something that's building on itself. And that's complexifying, just like you and me, just like wine. And that over time, organisms develop and refine over time. And you have to also see the earth, the human culture, the universe, the planetary systems as all things that refine over time. And this refinement complexifies and typically brings about a deeper understanding and perspective. Just like wine, you let it age in the barrel, and over time the flavors enrich, and there are more tannins and so forth that fill and penetrate into the wine, and it becomes absolutely delicious. Okay, and it's much better than it was when it was first bottled, or when it was first put in the barrel. Okay, and think of yourself in the same way, and think of the earth in the same way. And so you can derive meaning when you begin to see in this other perspective, in this deeper consciousness perspective. Okay, so imagine the earth is a nursery for consciousness. If consciousness is going to be seeded into the universe, how does that go about? How is an aperture for reality brought about into this multiverse existence that we're in? We all start as little tiny babies, and we can't run at that point. We can't even crawl. We can't even hold our head up. And over the first few years of life, you learn these very, very basic traits and characteristics you'll need as a human being to traverse through life. Now, take that same type of concept and how human consciousness is brought into the universe. Think of in the same kind of way, in that the earth is a nursery, a habitat where higher consciousness can be birthed and developed. If you notice the history of the earth, what you notice is that there is cataclysm after cataclysm in real specific times and stages over time. And if you look back at your life, what do you see? Catastrophe after catastrophe. In many lives, that's the case. In my life, that's the case. Just catastrophe after catastrophe. And what happens is you refine through that process. Human beings, in the human society, human culture, is the same idea. And over time, after catastrophe, in these very large scales of time, human culture is refined. And we are in the midst of refinement right now. You can think of us as wine that is in the midst of change in the barrel, and it's transitioning from a bitter or a too sweet a stage to this more rich, invigorated, lovely, absolutely lovely flavor. Okay, and human beings, human culture, it's operating the same dynamic. If you look into nature, you can see these patterns, and it will just make so much sense to you. And so, long ago, human beings were seeded, long before the origin stories that are in the myths that we now have, whatever part of the world you come from. There will be a set of myths that talk about your origin. I'm talking about the consciousness that is within this body. I'm not talking about the origin of the body. I'm talking about the consciousness, that which transcends time. The earth is a nursery for that, okay? And we were, as human beings, as a human culture, in process of refinement. And a pathogen came into the picture. We became infected with an evil pathogen that took over the development of human society, seized it, and kept it at a very specific level, so that we're just bright enough to be aware and know and spiritually cognizant, right? But not allowed to develop past that initiation, that first rung of awareness. And we've been held in stasis, and so have become diseased with bad ideas, bad religion, bad history, bad food, bad medical systems, on and on the list goes. We've become diseased because a pathogen infected us, told us a false history, gave us a false idea of ourselves, so that we would clamor and fumble and flip about like a fish out of water. Okay, now take that concept, that larger concept, okay, and it becomes so simple. What happened? So we're on the road of development as a human culture. Whatever body that we're in, the consciousness that's carrying through time on this planet, the seeds of consciousness that are traversing with the earth as it goes through its cataclysms, us as a human culture, that transcends time. So as the bodies keep dying and so forth, the consciousness transcends, it enters another body, and on it goes. The refinement continues. The awareness continues. So that was in process. Long before 10,000 years ago, long before Egypt. I'm talking hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years ago. Okay, so I'm talking about the manifesting of consciousness in the human species, in the human culture here on this planet. It's a nursery. And if a nursery gets an infection, I don't know if you've ever worked in horticulture, but if little plants begin to get an infection, it spreads like wildfire because their immune systems haven't fully developed. We were infiltrated, and this body was changed by whatever evil came to this nursery, this beautiful nursery. And they altered the development of the human being. So not only was our body changed, the envelope of our consciousness, even the DNA was altered. If you look at Lloyd Pye's video, we were severely altered from the course that we were, the path that we were on. Now, there is no mistake in the universe. So it's not a mistake that this happened. There's nothing wrong. In the same way, there's nothing essentially wrong with your life when you have bad things that happen to you. Nothing is wrong. That's part of life. We got infected with evil. We got infected with an alternate that doesn't care about human development, that doesn't care about human beings. And this place was turned from a nursery to a farm. As far as modernity is concerned, you, me, the now, current culture, current world, modernity, As far as modernity is concerned, this is a captured situation. We are a captured species. And we've been captured for a long time. Our DNA has been molested many times over. You've been given purposeful amnesia. It's been purposefully, you've been set up, programmed to purposefully never get this kind of concept in your head. So you would never know. Because obviously, if you knew, if this is true, nobody would stay. Nobody. So if you're in charge, the cattle can never know the real situation. Because then you're gonna lose your product. Your crop's gonna die. You're gonna lose the game. Because the profit is in the organisms. And they gotta go along with it because they have this thing called free will and free spirit, which is what makes them so valuable. A lion and bear don't have that. That's why they don't empathize with each other. They don't have empathetic capacity. You have that. Folks, that is extremely valuable. Freedom isn't just valuable to you, it's valuable to the species, the entire culture. If you look at Earth history, what you're going to see is that there's been cataclysm after cataclysm after cataclysm that have wiped out the human species time and time again. Now, what does that tell you? The cataclysms are happening literally like a clock. They all are happening at very specific times. And these cataclysms are happening on the money within 100 or so years of the transition. And bro, when that happens 15 times consistently over the last 250,000 years, you can't look at that and say, well, just coincidence. I mean, that's a foolish thing to do. To dumb down that perspective to just, oh, it's just chance. It just so happens that they're all landing at the same time in this 250,000 year history. Well, then you're a fool. Because you're dismissing the facts of the matter. See, that membrane of resistance has to be pierced. You have to see past the world that was placed in front of you. Here's a good way to put it. You were given a set of binoculars to see the universe. But if that's the only universe you ever see that went through those binoculars, that's going to be a pretty small universe. Because it's always going to be contained in that aperture. So as long as you keep looking into life through those binoculars, the only story you're going to know of your origin is the creation story. The only story you're going to know of science is one of basically a young Earth and history limited to basically the Egyptians and the emergence of the Egypt. And everything before that was just these pre-cultures and these little tiny tribes, because creation was shortly before that. So you're wearing these binoculars, and you don't realize it because that's the only world you've ever seen. Because you've been taught these things, like I said earlier in the video. You've been indoctrinated, and that means the binoculars never come off. And as long as those binoculars never come off, you're living in a hallucination. You're living in a very small reality, a golf ball sized reality, because it's only as big as that aperture. Man, you're never going to grow in that space. It's like if there's a neighborhood that's really run down and it's been run down for, say, 50 years, there's a whole ecosystem that's in play for these people to survive. And you can't just go in there and just wipe out all the filth, because you're going to displace these people and they're going to get sick. You're going to have to slowly get the people, all of them, out of that situation of disease and stagnancy and get them into a healthy environment, then repair where they've been living, build the buildings and do what's necessary to make it sanitary, and then you move them back in. It's no different with human culture. It's no different with human consciousness. There is a process that has to take place when a disease, a pathogen, is in the midst of the development of the nursery. That's why the earth became a farm for human beings. That's why your structure doesn't match the gravitational pull of this planet, and you have back problems and foot problems because the natural development of humankind was altered. Another species came in and changed our development into a different envelope, a different body that could be exploited, that was much more smoother, and in many ways and in many opinions, much more beautiful in appearance than like a Neanderthal, pre-human, pre-Homo sapien. That's why there's so much dysfunction. That's why the information and what has been fed you has been so bad. Because these farmers don't care about the farm in the sense of what's best for us. We're being exploited for what's best for them. What's best for them? Sucking our intellect, sucking our perception, sucking our spirit out of us. Taking away the joy and love that is the deeper sense of life, the deeper sense and meaning of this universe, of it all. If you can see our situation here on this planet as that, as a womb for consciousness and the development of consciousness, it makes everything make sense. The entire thing comes together. It's like a light bulb coming on. And see, it's no longer a problem what's happening. We're in the midst of a crisis, just like a human life. Consciousness, human consciousness, follows the same patterns that a forest uses for seeding the seeds. It's the same pattern and idea of chance, risk, randomness, but there's an organizing to it because the pattern is everywhere. In other words, you see thousands of different breeds, of different phenotypes, of different types of phyla on this planet, and they all have different shaped seeds, and they all have different ways of using the wind, animals, water, whatever, to propagate themselves. Just take that idea, that unique randomness in each species of plant. It's the same thing with conscious beings. And it just so happens that the forest is the universe. And it's a humongous, humongous space. And consciousness seeds itself in the same way the flowers seed themselves, just utilizing the environment. And this explains then how what has happened has happened. And we're on course. There's no problem. And that we right now are making a massive leap in awareness that's going to transcend the awareness of all of the human species, whatever shape and form they've been in ever on this planet. That's happening. We need to return to the idea of a nursery and partnership and so on and so forth, and the values of a human being and the values and needs of our development, and creating an environment that's very nursery-like, so that human beings are brought about in such a way that they are conducive with the environment, that it's not a conflict, to not be brought up in a conflict-oriented situation. And we really are oriented to conflict. It's one of the major points of my book, is that religion really orients people to conflict because it separates them from all other religions. So if you become an ardent believer in a specific religion, you will not accept any other reality but what that religion tells you. And religion applies also to science. It's not just limited to belief systems in the spiritual sense. It's also limited to belief systems in the material sense. And these religious or institutions of thought, right, hold the development in contempt. That's why they shut down development that went past the technology and what the farmers wanted you to know. And we're in the process of finding, like med beds, we're in the process of finding ways of healing the body through frequency and resonation that are much more effective than chemical interaction and chemical manipulation. Because we're frequency resonance oriented beings. So the best way to medically approach a being like that is through resonance, through harmony, through vibration, not through chemicals. You see, we're very spiritually lit. And so chemicals are an archaic means of healing the body. You'll do it much more effectively with resonance. That's why meditation is so effective and is such a healer and centers the life. Because you're working with the tools that are your assets, namely frequency, that you're a frequency-oriented being. Now, we all love the underdog, okay? We all love the underdog. We love the person who is born in a rough situation and maybe they're really poor from a really tough neighborhood, beat up, going to school, you know the story. Just really in a rough, underprivileged situation, right? We love that person because that person, everything was against them on the front end, right? Everything was against them. They didn't, all of it, the whole world was set up to be like, you know what, man, you're just not, it's not going to work out for you most likely. And they defied the odds. Those are the best stories because we love to see that. We love to see the team that was never supposed to win. We love that. It's in you because you know the odds and you know this should never work out. And this person beat the odds, man. Hats off to him. Now take that concept and apply it to the human species. How awesome is this situation? Everything was against us. Multiple generations who had been hunted and never had a chance. Look at our situation. We have been given the opportunity to save ourselves, to work ourselves out of a captured situation, a situation where there really shouldn't have been any hope. You see the story that's building. This is why it's so important for us to save ourselves and not be saved. Why? Because you know why. Because that person who works to save themselves, that's the value. You're not looking at what they've accomplished. You're looking at where they're from. You're looking at what they have pulled themselves out of. We value the character, the story, the impetus, the tenacity, the perseverance, the character that it takes to get out of the situation. Look at us here as a human species. We've been hunted for tens of thousands of years. God knows how many generations before us. All never had a chance. And here we find ourselves with the opportunity to transcend our destiny, to transcend what should have happened. You see the beauty in that, man? This would put an entirely different context in the Great Awakening for you. What an incredible, incredible opportunity for us as a culture. And it's happening. And as I said to Jen the other night, this makes it so that it doesn't matter what your origin is, essentially. Just like the kid that comes from the really bad neighborhood, doesn't matter. He overcame it. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter how bad it was. He overcame it. Look at us. It doesn't matter how rough and nasty the origin is. If it's a rough origin, I don't know. But it doesn't matter in this larger context. Because here we are. Our humanness, our humanity, our love for one another and love for ourselves. That's what's changing the world. We've been given the opportunity, for the first time ever, as a species, to be mass aware, to be awakened in the larger context, to a greater awareness, a greater perspective of our situation. Folks, that has never happened, as far as I know. That has never happened, which I guess isn't saying that much, but nevertheless, that has never happened before to the human species. We've never been given this chance. We have merited this. Do you understand that? We have merited this. Just like your life. Do you realize you won a race against billions? Because you were the one that fertilized the egg, man. You won. You merited the opportunity to have this life. You won. You beat the odds. You should have never made it to the egg. You were against billions, literally. Literally. And here you are. And now look at us. Who cares how many generations came before you? It doesn't matter. The point is, it doesn't matter in the sense of. That doesn't determine you. Just because there have been, say, 10 rounds of human beings, and all of them have ended with the human beings being totally destroyed, that doesn't determine our destiny as a culture. And now we're given the chance. I'll never forget, this is what kept me going when I was writing my book. I'll get teary-eyed talking about it. There's a scene, I think it's Good Will Hunting. I'm not sure. But it's Matt Damon. And he's with that other guy, I can't remember his name, it's the dark-haired guy. They wrote this movie, I think it's Good Will Hunting, and they're hardcore construction workers. I gotta hold it together. They're hardcore construction workers. And there's this scene. Man, I can't tell you how many times I thought this when I was writing. And Matt has this like gift. And the guy, his friend, who's working with him every morning, they're getting up at the crack of dawn and busting their asses all day. And this buddy of his knows that Matt has this gift. And in one scene, they're breaking the rocks or concrete or whatever it is. And he looks at Matt and he says something on the order of, if you have all the skills that you have, and you have this gift that you do, and you don't utilize it, and you keep coming here every day and busting your ass when you have this inside of you, and you don't use it to get out of this situation, fuck you, man. You deserve this life. You have every opportunity to get out of here. You're a freaking fool if you stay. That's his point. It's in us as human beings. It is in you. And we have every opportunity to blossom as a species. But we're going to have to rid of the parasite, the parasitical thinking that has been put into people to dehumanize them, turn them into something that they're not, namely from mongoloids and slime, or a sinner doomed to hell. You got to get out of these contexts if you're ever going to understand your true power in nature. And until you recognize yourself authentically for who you are, you will remain trapped and hunted. And guess what? You deserve it. That's the hard reality of nature. And that's what I had to face when I was writing. Chuck, if you don't finish this book, you deserve whatever comes to you after for not following through. Finishing the project and sharing with the world what you know. That's what each of us has to do. Share your gift with the world. That will save the world. There are things that you love, interests that you have, aspects of life that drive you. Fill your life with those things, because that will save the world. The joy and the beauty that you will emanate will save the world. That's what's required. Humanness. Love.
So how's your lady? She's gone. Gone where? Medical school in California. Really? Yeah. When was this? It's like a week ago. That sucks. So when are you done with those meetings? Like the week after I'm 21. Yeah, they gonna hook you up with a job or what? Yeah, fucking sit in a room and do long division for the next 50 years. Yeah, probably make some nice bank though. I'm gonna be a fucking lab rat. Better than this shit. Way out of here. I want to way out of here for. I mean, I'm gonna fucking live here the rest of my life. You know, be neighbors, you know, we'll have little kids, fucking take them to Little League together up Foley Field. Look, you're my best friend, so don't take this the wrong way. But in 20 years, if you're still living here, coming over my house to watch the Patriots game, still working construction, I'll fucking kill you. That's not a threat, that's a fact. I'll fucking kill you. What the fuck are you talking about? Look, you got something none of us have. Oh, come on. Why is it always this? I mean, I fucking owe it to myself to do this or that. What if I don't want to? No. No, fuck you. You don't owe it to yourself. You owe it to me. Because tomorrow I'm gonna wake up and I'll be 50. And I'll still be doing this shit. And that's all right. That's fine. I mean, you're sitting on a winning lottery ticket. You're too much of a pussy to cash it in. And that's bullshit. Because I'd do fucking anything to have what you got. So would any of these fucking guys. It'd be an insult to us if you're still here in 20 years. Hanging around here is a fucking waste of your time. You don't know that. I don't? No, you don't know that. No, I don't know that. Let me tell you what I do. Every day I come by your house and I pick you up. We go out, we have a few drinks and a few laughs, and it's great. You know what the best part of my day is? For about 10 seconds from when I pull up to the curb when I get to your door. Because I think maybe I'll get up there and I'll knock on the door and you won't be there. No goodbye, no see you later, no nothing. You just left. I don't know much, but I know that.